So, welcome back to Jacked Up Politics. We're here in the middle of election season, and as many of you have seen, we've kind of gotten our first few episodes up, and we want to thank everyone so far that's watched all the episodes, and we're very, very appreciative of all the love and support we're getting on the episodes, and we have a few more to come yet, so keep tuned for them. And today now we have Councillor Mary Linehan Foley, the independent councillor for the Middleton LEA, who is going for the local election. Many of you know Mary as the former Lord Mayor of Cork County, and she's now running as an independent candidate for the Cork East Constituency in the 2024 general election. Mary, thanks so much for coming on.
No problem at all, Jack. My pleasure. Delighted to be on.
So we were having a bit of a chit chat there just before the podcast began, or the episode began, and you were kind of giving us a brief rundown about yourself, and kind of you were saying there that you're former Fianna Fáil town councillor yourself and now independent running for the general election. Mary, if you wouldn't mind talking us through your thought process of why you wanted to run for the general election this year and what it means to run in the 2024 general election for you.
Well, I suppose, Jack, you're right there. I'm a county councillor with the last 10 years, and 15 years before that, I was a town councillor, and I was with a party with Fianna Fáil. So then, when the town councils were abolished and they were made into municipal districts rather than town councils, I went independent because at that particular time, Fianna Fáil were running other candidates and weren't really interested in running me. It was either go, forget about it, or give it a shot. And I gave it a shot and ran independent 10 years ago, 11 years now, I suppose. And I made it. I suppose I just got in at the skin of my teeth that time. 5 years after that, I went and topped the poll, which was amazing. And in June, I topped the poll again with nearly 1,000 surplus votes in the local election. So what really, I suppose, I've gone before, Jack, and I suppose your listeners are well aware of that. This is my third time, and each time I rise. So I just decided the support that I received from the East Cork LEA over the June elections that, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to try it and see how I go. My last general election, I suppose, I was last eliminated, so we barely made it. So why not? I'm going to give it a shot, Jack, and hopefully with your podcast and your help, I'll get my name out there to the areas that I mightn't be able to canvass.
And look, we're always very happy to help candidates get their name out there and hopefully get them across the line. And for any of our new listeners that will kind of be listening to this, that haven't tuned into the podcast before, is Jacked Up Politics was very instrumental in June of this year of getting several local election candidates in the Cove LEA across the line. Our podcast has been airing since February of this year, and while we are very new, we are very good at what we do, folks, and we are always there for candidates, be it general, local, or European, and we kind of strive ourselves on being the voice of the candidate and making sure that the candidate is able to get their message across to the public. So this kind of begins our first few questions for you now, Mary, is housing. I know if housing is anything like it is up here in Cove, like it is down in Middleton, given the housing crisis or the ongoing housing crisis, what practical step would you like to undertake to accelerate the building of affordable homes for families without undermining quality or sustainability?
Well, I suppose, Jack, I work every day in my day job, which is a county councillor. I'm a full-time county councillor, as mentioned before, and I work every day with constituents in the whole of the East Cork LEA, to be honest, on housing. And there is, as we are all well aware, there is a massive lack of housing. And I suppose really from private renting, which was always available. When I was growing up in my younger days, there was always plenty of houses or apartments to rent, but there's a massive lack at the moment. whether it's not, I don't think it's too attractive for landlords at the moment. So therefore, that's the lack with the renting. The social housing will never have enough, and you never will. And I've been, I suppose, helping people with a number of years, so I'm well aware of the need that is out there. The middle is where we're struggling. The guys that are, I suppose, that apply for social housing and are successful, the guys that apply for mortgages and are successful, but the guys that are in between this, they're working, they're above the social housing limit, and they're under a bank mortgage limit. This is where the shared ownership, affordable housing, and even service sites, which were available when I was able, when people, I suppose in my era, was able to buy properties, there were service sites belonging to the local authorities, and they got help in building their own homes or buying their own homes, basically. But an awful lot has to be done in housing, Jack. And I'm not going to come on to any podcast and say that, oh, elect me and I'll be able to start the problem. Not in a million years. There has to be more land available. This is the problem we have, I suppose, in the East Cork area, is there's not a lot of land available for social or affordable or shared ownership. But over the last number of months, within Cork County Council, there are sites coming up in all over West as well as South Cork, and there'll be lots in the Middleton LE area. I know there's a few coming up in the Cove LE area as well as the All area. So they are on the cards, but not enough, and never will there be enough, Jack.
And I suppose kind of another question people would have about housing as well, Mary, is what measures would you like to see kind of brought in to kind of bring the price of housing down for, say, new families? Because as we're seeing, the age of people leaving home is creeping up and up and up. I think at the moment now, the average age of someone leaving home is about 27, 28 years of age.
Yeah.
I'm kind of, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's now pushing 30. So, kind of like what I'm asking, what I'd like to know from yourself now is what kind of measures you'd like to see for pricing for housing brought in to kind of bring that price down to allow, say, someone who's around my age, being 26, 27, being able to afford their first time home and moving out into their own property.
And that goes back again, Jack, to what I mentioned, as in with the affordable and the shared ownership. There has to be more schemes like that. They have to be rolled out, like the service sites that I mentioned. These are the ones for the likes of yourself, Jack, and the people in the middle income, that they'd be more affordable, and shared ownership would be similar. Council helps, council mortgages, local authority mortgages, what they were bringing in with Rebuilding Ireland, but more open and more of them. They are, that's what's going to be the future. I have a daughter, she's 34 and she's living in my box room in my home. Full-time job, has always worked, and even had a second job. And there is no sight, or there's no light at the end of the tunnel that I can see for the likes of her. And I can speak personally because my daughter, in purchasing her own home with a good permanent job. So these are the people, the middle income, that are being left behind. So they have to get more schemes out there, basically, Jack, like shared ownership and affordable housing.
And this kind of brings me on to kind of another issue that's kind of tied in with the high cost of home ownership, is the cost of living. It's a very real issue for people at the moment. And with yourself, Mary, what would you like to see done to kind of slash the kind of costs of living that are rising, and kind of ensuring that the economic relief reaches those who need it the most, without kind of over kind of putting excess pressure on, say, future generations like myself and, say, your daughter's generation, like you mentioned?
Well, I suppose the cost of living is hitting everyone. It's hitting the young and the elderly as well. It's hitting everyone. And I've been out in the doors there over the last number of days, and I could honestly say, and I only spoke about it actually earlier when I got back in from canvassing this evening. It was one of the major things that was brought up on the doorsteps. And again, it's people that are working, more tax breaks, without a doubt. They need them, without a doubt. They're commuting to cities or to other towns to work. The cost of diesel, the cost of petrol. The Greens were encouraging more transport, more green light transport, as in trains, use the buses, whatever. I'm living in an area where there's no train in Youghal area, in the East Cork
Mm.
area. You have to go to Middleton. So what do? You try and get in a bus. There's not enough buses. You've students waiting to get onto buses in the morning to go to college, and some of them are left behind because the buses are full. So, like, if you're going to bring something in to an area, you're going to have to provide the services that are there.
Mm.
But as well as with the cost of living, the price of diesel gone through the roof, the price of petrol gone through the roof. We're encouraged to use electric cars. How can people afford to buy electric cars? They're through the roof. So, like, you're trying to do one thing and make it more environmentally friendly. And I'm sure there's a question coming up on that in this on this podcast as well. But those both of those are combined, and I see it. The cost of living. There just needs to be more tax breaks for the people that are working, and they need to make it more, I suppose, attractive for people to go out and work, as well as being able to afford to live.
Mm. And talking about services and kind of lack of thereof for services, this kind of brings me on to the HSE, which we all know the HSE is massively under strain. It's basically at breaking point, if it's not already past breaking point. And just for the listeners, Mary, what would you like to see done to improve the efficiency in the HSE and kind of reduce those massive long waiting lists while ensuring people living in rural areas in kind of Middleton and further astray Northeast Cork kind of are able to receive that kind of timely and effective care? What would you like to see done?
Well, what I'd like to see is what's happening is, Jack, and from my work, I suppose I'm on the HSC forum through Cork County Council, and we see it all the times. We're actually exporting our best minds at the moment that are training as doctors and nurses. They're going to Australia and they're going everywhere. We need to make it more attractive again for them to stay in Ireland. They're going to they're leaving school, they've bright careers ahead of them, and they're gone. As soon as they're qualified, they're gone. We need to be able to keep them in our country and in our towns and in our villages. There's a shortage of GPs all over, not just East Cork area, but all over Cork County. I attend meetings monthly on that. And, like, while we always had the GP, I'm sure you remember, or Jack, well, you're too young, but I know your parents would remember GPs back in the day were full and plenty. We can't get them in rural Ireland anymore. And even in urban, we can't get them. So, like, you've older GPs that are retiring, and we don't have younger ones to stay here. So, like, it needs to be made more attractive. Their
Yeah.
income needs to go up, basically, because if it's not attractive, they're going to emigrate. And that's what's happening. Half of our doctors, our young nurses, are flying off to either America or Australia. And, like, if we can keep them here, that will alleviate some of the pressure that's on the health system. We'll have more nurses. It'll be more attractive for them to live here. And that's going back again to, as you mentioned just before there, the cost of living, you know? So all of it is combined. Every question that you're asking me, or every issue that you're discussing here, Jack, all of them are under kind of the one umbrella. We need to help the people that are getting qualified and working and wanting to become doctors and nurses. We need to give them a wage that they can live on in Ireland and rent a property, which there's no private renting out there. So all of that is combined, Jack.
Mm. And this kind of brings me on to public transport.
Yeah.
You were just talking there how some college students are getting left behind in Youghal and Middleton because the buses are so full going up in the mornings. What would you like to see done to ensure public transport becomes more accessible and reliable, especially for rural areas with kind of older age demographic and population dynamics than, say, more urban areas? And kind of what would you like to see done public transport wise for those kind of rural areas that be left behind?
Well, I suppose number one, what's great in our local area at the moment, all over the county, is the local link. That is a massive success, especially down this area. Where we're trying to, obviously in my LEA, you have the likes of the Ballymacoda, the Clines in that area, and we're trying to make sure and to widen it. But you all lost this railway line a number of years ago, and it was widely known. You know, back when we looked before the Greenway started, which our Greenway will be opening there in December, we asked Irish Rail at that particular time, because that's the lands that are rented or leased to Cork County Council for the Greenway, would there be a possibility of a railway line being reinstated from Middleton back, because it was new at the time, the Middleton railway line to Cork and to Glanmire and that area. And they told us no, it wouldn't be financially viable. But I'm talking now 15, 20 years ago, Jack, when we did raise it before the Greenway started, and they said it wouldn't be viable. At this precise time, it is viable. We've an N25 that we've no funding for to get a bypass or anything. So you've people commuting to the city from down in Youghal, Middleton area as well. Middleton aren't so bad, they have their train, but they're trying to get to Middleton to the train to use public transport like they're being advised to do because of the environment and whatever else. And you're stuck in traffic in Castlemartyr for 25, 40 minutes, you know? So like, it's not attractive for people to commute anymore. We need more buses for the population that's here. For students travelling, for elderly that have to travel to hospital appointments, it's just not working. So we certainly need, whether, I know it's a Greenway that's there now, but we need some type of a link. Like they were mentioning something similar to a loose link, maybe from Youghal to tie up with Middleton railway station and go from there. More buses is needed. If they want to get people off the road, they need to have more public transport available. And unfortunately, in my LEA, that's not available.
And this kind of brings us into the lack of kind of public transport, kind of brings us in then to another very significant question that's been raised by listeners is mental health.
Yes.
What would you like to see done to address the mental health crisis for young people in the country, as well as those in marginalised communities?
I suppose with the mental health, again, that goes under the HSC forum that I'm a member of over the last number of years, and it's constantly raised the CAMS and the waiting lists there. And again, that goes back to, I suppose, educating our young psychiatrists, psychotherapists that's needed. And again, they're immigrating. We need to make it more attractive to keep them in the country to try and bring down the waiting list. There needs to be certainly more support out there for our young people, and not just the young, Jack. It needs to be out there for anybody who's suffering with their mental health, to make sure that there is, and I know the likes of Pieta House, and I know there's an awful lot of good organisations out there on a voluntary basis that help, and a lot of them don't have departmental funding. They have to do it on a voluntary basis. But we certainly need an awful lot. There's a lot of work to be done around the mental health. And I think, Jack, COVID had an awful lot to do with, the rise in the figures for people suffering with either depression, anxiety, whatever. We don't have the services. So we need major investment in them services in the whole LEA area down here. And I know over the Cork East area as well, other councillors from north, west, every one of us are always singing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to mental health. There is not enough services there. There needs to be way more money invested in it. And we need to keep the likes of our psychiatrists that we're educating in the country.
And kind of, I suppose, mental health kind of ties us into our next point. Is kind of the likes of addiction and crime. And this brings us on to our question on crime and policing.
Again,
what would you like to see done to reduce rising crime rates across East Cork, and how would you like to see tough enforcement balanced with rehabilitative programs for offenders?
Well, I suppose we don't have enough beat on the street or Gardaí on the street. That's countrywide again. It's not just our area, but my area in particular. The crime rate gets high and getting higher, and we don't have the Gardaí, I suppose, to police it. But it's something, and you touched on it there, Jack, about rehabilitation, and that goes back to the mental health. As I always feel, we all have children. Well, I do. I have children, I have grandchildren growing up. And I think communication and mental health is the one thing that we need more investment in. to stop addictions and to stop, I suppose, crime as well, because a lot of the time, a lot of the crime in the area is through addiction. So one leads into another. And, we don't have the services, or we don't have, I suppose, enough Gardaí on the street, and then that goes back to the department again. There's not enough investment in it, and I know my own daughter. One of my daughters went for the Gardaí there lately. She passed everything, the aptitude and everything, and she just missed out slightly on the fitness by point something of a second in this fitness, whatever they call the fitness type side of it anyway. And like, she would have loved to be there, but she told me on the day in question, when she went forward for the Gardaí, there was something like 14 failed on point something of a second, you know. So, like, I suppose at the end of the day, I think there needs to be an overhaul of people applying to the Gardaí, because there's an awful lot of good candidates out there that would love to be members of the Gardaí, but there might be something like a fitness of a point something of a second that's stopping them, and that shouldn't be allowed. At the end of the day, if people are willing, that's a vocation. I think anyone that's a guard is a vocation, because it's something, you'd have empathy for people and you want to work with people, and they should be given it should be a bit more lenient for them to get into it. I do know plenty. And again, it leads back to wages and their income. A lot of them that are trained and in different cities around the country, when you're in training, you're either placed maybe Dublin, Limerick, Cork, wherever, and a lot of them are commuting from rural Ireland. They can't afford the rent on the income that they're getting. So that income, to encourage more Gardaí to join the forces, the department again would have to step in and help with the income side of it.
Hmm. And this kind of brings us into another segment, then, Mary, is kind of with immigration. Immigration is kind of tied in with the crime and policing as well, because what a lot of people don't realise is that the guards are actually responsible for the Immigration Bureau here in Ireland. And
Yes.
the big question that was raised was, what measures would you like to see brought in to manage immigration in a way that meets Ireland's humanitarian obligations while ensuring effective integration and community supports for those who are immigrating into Ireland?
Well, I suppose number one on that, what I'd certainly like to see, and I'm only talking from my experience as a public representative and trying to get information from IPAS and from the department on integrating anyone that finds themselves in the position that they have to emigrate at the end of the day, is where we should have a specialised, like, I've tried, I suppose the best way of explaining it is, in Youghal, and I know in the East Cork area, we've quite a lot of immigrants that came in with the Ukraine war, and they integrated very well, and then they were shifted on to other areas after integrating and getting jobs and whatever. We need a specialised department, somebody heading, that we have a touch base with. We can pick up a phone and talk to somebody. Hey, there's X amount happening, or there's however many coming in. Can we have details on where they're from, and other stuff like that?
So, thanks for that, Mary. That was a very kind of insightful answer. Um, so, as we've seen over the last few months, political accountability is being a very hot potato in terms of what people have kind of brought up. We've seen issues with Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. We've even seen issues with Sinn Féin, and even with some independent TDs. What measures? I know the SOC Dems turned around today and said they'd love to see a government accountability office brought in, but what would Mary Linehan Foley, as a TD, like to see brought in to introduce and improve transparency and accountability among politicians, public officials, and civil servants?
Well, I suppose I'd probably agree. Not that I'd agree with any parties. I work well with every party, but I would agree actually with the SOC Dems and what they said there. I think that's very good. And especially, I think over the last 12 months, Jack, more than ever, accountability has to be key. And I would agree with maybe having a department that oversees the like of that, because look, at the end of the day, we're all human. Don't get me wrong. And sometimes I suppose as a politician, um, you know, maybe some people think you're extra human.
Mm.
Um, and you know, I'm not taking away from now accountability or anything like that. But at the same time, you know, you can make mistakes in life. Everybody makes mistakes in life. But when you're a public representative, you have to make sure that you're a member. Well, I'm a member of Cork County Council or a member of Dáil Éireann, and that you have to be held accountable for your actions. So, you know, when you're going for any job, you have to be accountable. So why not in politics as well? But I think transparency, and you touched on that there, is a massive thing. You know, we're wide open. I'm wide open as a public representative, and I have been for the last 26 years. And like, we all have personal lives as well as that, and we all have past as well as that. But like, at the end of the day, if you have transparency and you're honest with the people respect you for that, and they'll put you back into office. And I'm accountable to the people that vote for me. So, like, if my constituents aren't happy with me, I always say, even on social media or whatever, if somebody isn't happy with some decision I've made for whatever reason, I always say, contact me. Let's chat about it. Let's see where we can go from here. Because not everybody agrees with everyone. And that's the good thing about democracy. I mightn't agree with you on certain
Mm.
issues. You mightn't agree with me. But let's sit down and have a chat about it and try and find a happy medium. And I
Yeah.
think that's worked for me as an independent, Jack.
Mm.
You know, working with all
Yeah.
the larger parties in County Hall, especially because the bigger parties obviously have the more people elected, whereas independents would be smaller. And I've worked with every party bar none, and I've had no complaints. Or, you know, I mightn't agree with their policies, they mightn't agree with
Mm.
mine, but we always get a happy medium. But yes, I agree with the SOC Dems. We do need something at a national level to oversee all that.
Mm. And kind of like another thing that's kind of brought up quite a bit as well is the fact that coming to accountability now is kind of the Minister for Education, you know, and how much of a blunder it's been with the 9 million euro over those phone pouches.
Yes,
And this kind of
yes.
brings us into kind of the education side of things now with how would you like to address maintaining high standards in the Irish education system while also kind of balancing equality in access to education between rural and urban settings in East Cork. Because as we know, East Cork is it can either be very, very urban in the likes of Cove, Middleton and Youghal and Fermoy, and then everywhere else it can be very, very sparsely populated.
Yes, and that's going back, I suppose, the education and the issues that I'm seeing on the doorsteps would be probably more lack of transport to for education rather than education itself. The schools are there, and they're very, very good schools, and there's a very high level of education in all the schools. But we have, again, the for Education every September, every July, even August, going into September, people have no spaces on school buses to get to the schools that they need to get to. And that's a massive issue in my LEA area. And I know it's an issue as well further afield from there. But like, I suppose communication is a big thing. And I always think with local representative, as in local councillors, Jack, sometimes when you're a TD, you lose that local bit of knowledge as to what's going on the ground. Because I understand you're dealing with national issues and you're dealing with national
Mm.
policies and stuff like that. And obviously, at a local level, you're dealing more potholes, school spaces, and stuff like that. Whereas I think communication between local and national is a big thing to do with the education, what's needed on the ground, you know, what capacity to put, what amount of buses we need in the area before the school year starts. Parents are panicking and anxious. Their kids have places in schools. Luckily, in the my LEA, there's plenty of spaces at the moment in schools. It's to get them to the school is what the problem is there. But I would feel that we have a good education system in Ireland. You know, I wouldn't knock the education system that we have. I know I've educated all of mine in my own local area, And,
Mm.
there was never any issues, and they were quite entitled to do whatever they wanted to do, and they had the education to do so. So I do think we've come a long way with education. But again, it's lack of the transport issue is number one, and getting them to the schools of their choice.
Mm. And that's a very important thing as well. And this kind of brings me into my second to last question now is about agriculture. And we've kind of seen that farmers here in Ireland have been absolutely decimated by EU regulations and environmental targets. So, what measures would you like to see, Mary, brought in
Yeah.
to help introduce to kind of help the farmers meet their environmental targets while also maintaining their competitiveness? Because, as we know, Irish meat is some of the best available in the world in terms of Irish beef and Irish lamb is highly sought after. So, what would you like to see done in maintaining that competitiveness and to ensure that quality remains high?
I've lost you there, Jack. I've lost you there. Um, I've lost coverage of you there. I only got bits of what you actually asked there. Can you
Yeah.
just repeat that if you don't mind me? I don't know, is it my coverage or yours?
So, what measures would you like to see taken in maintaining competitiveness for Irish farmers so that they can meet their environmental targets?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can just about I can just about hear you now, Jack. I don't know, am I losing coverage or are you?
Um, I I've three bars here anyway, so I don't know. Right, give me a
One
sec.
sec now. How will I see my bars? One sec. Let's
If you tap
No,
on,
I'm good here. I've plenty of bars and I'm by the internet.
okay, well, I'll ask you that one again. What steps would you like to see taken to support Irish farmers so that they can meet their environmental targets?
I suppose really what I feel on that, Jack, would be there's a lack of communication between the Department of Agriculture and the farmers on the ground. I feel that while they're throwing out all these, I suppose, green plans for them, which we do have to look after our environment, and I understand that totally. But I feel there's a lack of communication with the farmers on what they expect them to do. Some of them are realistic and some of them aren't. Like, we do need to look after our environment, but we also have to look after the farmers and make sure that they're subsidised if they're going to be making or meeting the needs that the department are demanding on them, basically. So, like a big lack of communication and out canvassing, speaking to a lot of the farmers, this is what they quoted to me that they would like to communicate more with the department and maybe help grants, subsidies, whatever, to help them to stick with what they expect them to do environmentally.
Mm, definitely. And
Did you
speaking to the
did
environment,
you get that?
hmm?
Yeah,
Yeah, we got that.
you
Uh,
got that, Jack. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
This brings us in onto our last question then, is about climate change. What plans would
Yeah.
you like to see brought in to balance Ireland's climate goals while protecting the interests of rural communities and farmers?
Again, that goes back to, I suppose, similar to your last question. Like, for instance, I've been speaking again, even in the local elections, this came up back in June. And anyone that I've been speaking to, they burn a bit of turf or burn a bit of coal or
Mm.
whatever. It's all they have at the end of the day. And like, you know, they're the department were encouraging people to put in the air to water and different things. But yet, these people and the likes of the rural farmers that I met can't afford to do this.
Mm.
They can't afford to get rid of this one source of heating that they have to put in air to water. So, like, while everything looks lovely on paper, on the ground again, and locally communication again, and helping these people to reach our targets that we're meant to reach, there's no way it's going to happen. And I understand that overnight. But again, I'm a big believer in my job, I suppose, as a public representative. We lack communication between national level and local level. And if that could be increased, we'd know the feedback from the ground, and the departments and the TDs would know what feedback needs to be raised at national level.
Mm. And I think that's a very fair point, Mary. Um, so those were the questions, Mary. The main interview questions.
Okay, Jack.
We just have two kind of final questions for you. The kind of penultimate
Okay.
question we have for you is, it's October 30th, the votes are starting to be counted, and you're elected. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Um, I try not to think of 5 years' time. I try to kind of think as in, where do see myself next year and the year after? I, you know, Jack, I love what I do. I love being a public representative at this level.
Mm.
It would be my dream to be a public representative at national level. It was always what I was striving for. And I feel I've 26 years under my belt, that this is the right time for me. I've the experience, I've the knowledge. I know what's needed on the ground. I've worked there for 26 years, and I know what I could bring to the Dáil is openness. Communication would be a big thing for me to bring. But in 5 years' time, I'd love to be going for re-election to keep my Dáil seat.
And we hope that we are seeing you in the Dáil in 5 years' time, hopefully getting re-elected, and hopefully back on the podcast with us here, chatting about the last 5 years of you being a TD for Dáil Éireann. And Mary,
I'd love that, Jack. And by the way, if I was elected, I'd hope that you might do another podcast and I could keep you briefed on how it was going up there, because I always like to get back to people. I feel when you're elected, the following day after the election is the thought of your next re-election.
Definitely. And this kind of brings us on to our final question. Is, what advice do you have, Mary, for any young person looking to get involved in politics, looking to get involved with community activism, and or activism in general? What's your advice to them?
Go for it. Go for it. I always say it, even here with my own family. If you want to get involved in local politics or national politics, go for it. If you feel you can make a difference, if you're somebody that loves people, which I do, and you feel that you can make a difference, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, go for it. It's very, very rewarding. It can be tough at times. And local politics now, at the level I'm at, is a 24-hour job, whereas before it was more part-time, but very, very rewarding. I love people. I love meeting people. And if you think that this is for you, don't let any obstacle stop you. Go for it.
So, Mary, thanks so much for that. Folks, this has been our interview with Mary Linehan Foley, the independent councillor.
No problem, Jack. It was my pleasure.
So, Mary, what I'm going to do there now is I'm just going to finish recording the episode, and we'll have a bit of a debrief then. So, folks, this has been that's been Mary Linehan Foley, independent councillor candidate for the general election. Mary, thanks for coming on. You've been a great guest.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been our pleasure. Right. So,